Welcome to Truth in a Nutshell. Since 10 minutes is all we have, we will dispense with the fluff, with the oftentimes monotonous and irrelevant build-up and introduction, and get right down to the topic for this week. The topic for this week is a crucial one for every believer that strives to walk the narrow path of faith, for every believer that realizes that this walk is a walk of conflict, temptations, and trials. This week's teaching begins with a question. That question being, how do we confront temptation? How do we stand against spiritual attacks? Mark chapter 14, verse 38 says the following, "Watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. The spirit truly is ready, but the flesh is weak." I realize it is not popular to mention this in Christian circles, since we all consider ourselves victors and overcomers, conquerors and warriors, but it is undeniable that this life is fraught with dangers. Satan is not some mystical caricature, some invention of the human psyche, but a very real enemy. One who is cunning and a master of deception, an enemy who is ruthless, merciless, and willing to commit great resources in getting you to doubt, to lose heart, to lose hope, and to fall into his snares. We face and confront the same enemy that attempted to tempt Christ, the self-same enemy that succeeded in tempting Peter into denying Christ. And it would behoove us to remember that the enemy did not file for retirement. He did not quietly go into the dark night, but is still at work, still doing what he has been for millennia, attempting to deceive the children of God. Knowing this, realizing the fact that the enemy is still assaulting and assailing the children of God, that the churches are still under siege, the question that remains to be asked is, how can we obtain victory when the enemy assails us? How do we keep from entering into temptation? The first means by which we obtain victory when we are under siege by the enemy is to make certain that we are wholly surrendered and wholly devoted to Christ. When the heart is wholly surrendered to Christ and belongs to Him in its totality, the enemy has no ally to which he can turn. When we are completely submitted to the will of God and our singular purpose is to mirror Christ, there is no part of us that will betray us to the enemy. No area of the heart that will turn traitor and react positively to the temptation the enemy places before us. If we are Christ's and Christ's alone, the enemy will not find any chink in the armor or any weaknesses which he can then exploit towards our detriment. The second means by which we obtain victory is to avoid the circumstances, the places, and the practices that we know to be triggers for temptation. Some people fall into temptation simply because of the choices they make, the steps they take, one after the other, leading them further and further down the wrong path. They fall into temptation because they head down the avenues that they know in their hearts are wrong and destructive. In my country, there are roads that lead into the mountains that clearly have warning signs informing the hikers and more, let's say, adventurous tourists that they enter the forest at their own risk. Since there are bears and wolves aplenty who have been known to attack humans on a frequent basis, men take that risk and go. Now, having read the warning, every person has to weigh his or her options and decide whether they want to risk an attack by a wild animal and walk through the forest or find another route that avoids the dangerous areas. As the old saying goes, no one knows you better than you know yourself. And as such, we know our weaknesses. We know the things which the old flesh found attractive or seductive, and it is up to us to make the conscious choice to avoid them. Sometimes the only resource one has in the face of temptation is to run away from it. Just as Joseph ran from before the face of Potiphar's wife, we run from temptation. To be indifferent or to do nothing in the face of such circumstances is to play right into the hands of the enemy. There are times, however, there are instances when a temptation cannot be avoided, but rather it must be confronted. What then must we do to make sure that while confronting temptation, we not enter into it, but rather overcome it? As far as the answer to this particular question, the Word of God was very precise, giving a straightforward and simple answer in order to make certain that we not enter into temptation. Even when we are forced to confront it, we must watch. We cannot impede the enemy's attack against the citadel of our souls, but we can make certain that he doesn't get in. The attacks will come. They always do. But if we are watchful, we will be able to guard against them, and the enemy will not be able to get beyond the outer walls of our defenses. A wise man knows every access point and every entrance into his soul's citadel, and he places a guard at every one. After a certain number of attacks, we can even deduce where the enemy's next attack will be aimed. And then we can place a larger contingent of guards and watchmen in that particular access point. A watchful man is a wise man, and a man who is wise and watchful is never taken by surprise. The second thing we must do in order to ensure victory is to pray. In my humble opinion, if every Christian understood the benefits of prayer, there would be a lot more Christians praying. Every man who stood out in the work of God, who excelled and rose above his contemporaries, be it of this generation or generations past, was a man of constant prayer. Prayer is not an option for the believer, it is a necessity. Just as oxygen is a necessity for the human organism, and without it we would die, prayer is a necessity for the spiritual man, and without it, the spiritual man withers and dies. Whether your prayer is for a means of avoiding temptation, a means of escaping it, or strength to persevere and overcome it, it is still by prayer that one reaches out to God and petitions Him. Watch as though everything were dependent upon your vigilance, but pray as though everything depended upon God. That is a good saying. The last thing we must do in order to ensure that we not enter into temptation, that we not fall into the snare of the enemy, is quite simply fight. Perhaps this is what Paul meant when he urged us not to be overcome by evil, but to overcome evil with good. The best way to resist temptation, and especially the temptations of the enemy, is to actively oppose him. Evil will never be able to seduce, lure, or tempt a soul that delights and finds its pleasure in the light, that finds its fulfillment in righteousness and its purpose in holiness. When we are forced and when we are faced to face or overcome temptation, when we are faced with the attacks of the enemy, we cannot be indifferent. We cannot simply twiddle our thumbs and wait to be rescued. We must go on the offensive. We must fight, we must persevere, and we must overcome. Trials, temptations, testing, and sifting are all part of this present life. But if we prove ourselves faithful and stand true, there is also a promise to which we can cling that goes beyond this present life, this present age, and echoes into eternity. May we never forget the words of James chapter 1, verse 12. Blessed is the man who endures temptation, for when he has been proven, he will receive the crown of life, which the Lord has promised to those who live and love Him. May you be wise. May you be blessed. May you endure. May you be proved, that you may one day stand before the throne of God and receive the crown of life, which He has promised to those who love Him. God bless you.